Okay.
Okay, this is Chris and Taya, Kristopher Walton with Kristopher L. Walton and Associates. And Taya is our amazing
Executive assistant.
executive assistant who manages and takes care of all business here at the KLWA. Okay, I'm excited we're doing the podcast again. It's nice to see you and to talk here. And what we plan on doing today is talking about I love you if instead of I love you for. Because think about it, the idea about conditional love statements are people are not good enough for being loved for who they are. They're only good enough if they are loved based on what is expected from an outside source. And usually the outside sources that I see so frequently are people who are loved if they are doing what their mom tells them to do, what their dad tells them to do, a lot of times what their religion tells them to do, or a boss tells them to do, a professor or a school teacher tells them to do. And so a lot of times people are walking around the planet not really feeling like they are loved for them or liked for themselves. So they have to be altering and changing their personality for whatever the person is or organization is around them to be loved and accepted. And so emotionally, so outside of ourselves, we're performing for these individuals who are around us. But inside of ourselves, we disconnect from our true sense of self, of who we are inside of ourselves, about what we like, what we, some people will give up what restaurant they want to go to, or kind of food they want to eat, or they give up all this power and control to everybody else. And they really don't feel like they have a value of self inside themselves. They feel like they have to be what other people want them to be, and they can't be themselves because themselves isn't really liked. So it creates a sense of feelings of inadequacy, helplessness, hopelessness, worthlessness internally, insecurity, fear, unknowing what's going to happen next. And that's oftentimes really scary. It's really scary for people not to be liked for who they are. And that conditional love statement.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I was just thinking about how that can be conditional, and just how even putting expectations on people for like performance-based sports, or anything that has a measurement, or even I guess school could even be considered something, because it is achievement-based, it is like performance-based type of thing, and how that could make people either feel less or more depending on if they got an F or an A, or whether they scored 50 points or 2 points, just depending on whatever it is. I think like people start to kind of train themselves to base themselves off of that, rather than basing themselves off of like who they are as a person and how they treat people, and like finding something that matters a little more than whatever that expectation is that is set on them. I don't know, what do you think expectations role has in all of this?
Well, I think there's a lot of expectations, because I think the different sources have different expectations. So people have to morph themselves to be what all these other things. And so I think it really creates a sense of insecurity, inferiority, because people just don't believe they're ever going to be good enough. And when they're not feeling good enough already, and measuring themselves to the other big outside source, I would say social media, Instagram, how many kids get on Instagram every single day, or adults, just so you know, and they're
right.
measuring their lives to what they see through a filtered self on the other side. Most people filter what their image out there, and so they measure their value based on that filtered image. Like they don't have any pimples, or they don't have any freckles, and they don't have any whatever, and they're shaped perfectly, and all these other filters that people do. And so when you're looking at that, what does it do to yourself? I mean, it's like I'm not going to ever be pretty enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not handsome enough. I'm not strong enough. And so there starts this internal belief system that one, it will never measure up to what is an acceptable love object or a beauty object or something like that. And so people get on there, they kind of get addicted to this idea of, I've got to keep on thinking about how to better myself, because I'm never going to be good enough for what everybody wants. And so this really creates a lot of isolation, a lot of loneliness inside of self. And vulnerability of talking about that to someone else is utterly terrifying. So people are not going to talk about it because it's too scary.
Right, like going up to someone and saying like, no, I just don't think that I am enough. Like just as a whole person, because once you probably start with like, I'm not good at this, or I'm not good at this, or it starts with your eyebrows, and then it moves to your nose and your freckles and whatever you said, and so then eventually it's like, no, the whole thing, like me as a whole, because it's easy to complain to your friends like, oh, my eyebrows aren't da 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 da, or like, oh, I just can't get my jump shot, or what I'm saying. But then the next thing you're down that hole of just so much like self-doubt and self-hate that you just don't even see yourself as enough, and whenever you put that enough statement behind anything, that's a pit, that's a hole.
That's the hole right
Yeah.
there, right, because it really gets back to never being enough for what everybody else wants,
Right.
and then that's just a perception of what everybody else wants. But what's interesting is about getting older. I'm older now, I'm 58, and what's interesting about that is a lot of times people in their 20s are always worried about whatever people are thinking about them. And when people hit their 40s, they don't really care. And then you get old like me and you realize that people really don't have time to think that much about you. And that is because why?
They've probably found other meaningful things in their life to fill their time. I don't know.
Well,
what do you think?
It's because people are thinking about themselves.
Well, yeah.
Like who's thinking about you right now? Who on the planet is thinking about you right this microsecond?
I mean, we're chatting here. I think about myself. I was like, maybe my husband out there.
I doubt your husband's thinking about you right now. I don't think my wife's thinking about right now.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about you right now because I'm talking to you right now.
Sure.
And you're talking to me right now. But outside of that, your siblings, your friends, they're all running their own individual lives and they're focusing on whatever is going on right now at work or at school or friends or taking a nap or whatever. They're thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about you.
Right.
But inside of our negative mind is everybody's thinking about us and everybody's measuring our value based on our perceptions of ourselves and through our own negative filter. So there's always, and what that does is create anxiety. We're going to be afraid all the time as we're walking around the planet anticipating rejection, abandonment, inadequacy, because we just don't think we're ever going to measure up to all these outside sources because we're just so focused on measuring ourselves against that. Because we too are not thinking about, oh, I'm judging that girl over there, or I'm judging my brother, I'm judging my husband, or I'm judging my boyfriend or girlfriend. We don't really think about it that way. Mm-hmm. It's always an introjection, what we're saying to ourselves inside of ourselves in a negative light, as opposed to this whole idea of us judging all these other people on the outside, because we don't really do that. Periodically, people will come around and judge other people. Most people are not really obsessively thinking about how they're judging other people all the time. And if they are, then a lot of times they have a lot of anger, anxiety, depression, and they come into treatment. Come into mental health treatment. So people are forecasting that. I would say most people coming into treatment, though, are introjecting inside of themselves of not being loved or good enough for usually the primary source, and that is mom and dad. They just couldn't be good enough for what mom and dad wanted. Mom and dad had a favorite in the family. Usually maybe it's an older kid, older sibling or something like that. And the oldest sibling, the first sibling, is the first one to be loved because that's the one that mom had time to have attachment to. Mm-hmm. And in larger families, this happens rather frequently, where the next siblings that come down the line are not given as much attention. And so the oldest one may get a lot of attention, but then the younger ones don't get as much attention. And that's very painful for people because they feel rather left out and disconnected.
Right.
It's sad.
Yeah, like Sarah was talking about that the other day. Just how the less time you have to spend, then the less, the whole leaving out and just not getting that kind of attachment and things like that. You have to be very intentional about it. And I would say, just thinking as if I was a parent who had a lot of kids, that you'd really have to go out of your way to make sure to form those attachments and to know what's going on and to keep that in check because you don't want to be the root of that, the root of your kid saying like, oh, I just never was loved, you're like, oh no, I did that. But I was thinking about kind of back to the whole social media thing, about how kids now or teens now are dealing with social media and everything just coming up like that. They don't have to adjust to having social media like you did, like my parents did, like even I did. I didn't start 5th grade with an Instagram. I got one my freshman year or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I think like that is probably going to have a pretty big effect. But what do you think like the biggest effects that will have, and how do you kind of see that affecting the younger generations?
I think that interpersonal relationship is really dying off because people are getting more into their devices than they are into sitting down one-on-one with someone else. The Facebook metaverse thing that's coming up is going to be an interesting experiment. I think a lot of young people are going to get on there. They're already playing Fortnite or whatever they're playing, and they're already used to being online with an avatar and doing all of this stuff.
Right.
And as they start to do that more in a more modern world, it's going to be an interesting experiment. I think there's going to be a lot of mental health complications from that because depending on your orientation, your perspective, if it's the world's been around for 6 million years or 6,000 years or 10 million years or more, human beings have not been socialized to do that, to isolate in a small room and just to be visually connected to someone or auditory connected to someone. We get a lot of stimulation by having conversations with people and having other people in the room. So just to do these things isolating online is going to create, I think, more anger, anxiety, depression, FOMO, trying to figure out how to fit in and not knowing how to do that really well. Long term, I think it's going to be complicated. I think it's already complicated right now because people are spending so much time online. We do online therapy, and I think with online therapy, it's harder to do than it is in person because we can't necessarily measure the other person based on the nuances of open communication versus just listening or visual input. So I think it's hard. I think it's hard, and I think it creates so much loneliness. That's the number one thing that I see with conditional love statements is that no matter what I do, I'm never going to be good enough. And I'm trying to have a connection online. I'm trying to have a sense of someone to like me, love me. And no matter how hard I try, I'm still not satisfied. Because I think that's going to be most of the online experience is a lack of satisfaction.
Yeah. And that just made me start thinking about online dating even too, is you are looking for some kind of love, some kind of connection, but then it ends up just being a person on a screen again. So you're just kind of hitting a lot of dead ends there because maybe you get ghosted, maybe the date shows up and it's not the same as over text or whatever it is, and that even complicates creating further relationships that could break that cycle of unconditional love for you.
Right. And I think it creates the anticipation for abandonment. I no matter what I am, I'm never pretty enough, and I'm never good enough. I'm never strong enough. I'm never rich enough. There's something wrong with me. I am a broken person because wherever I go, I'm not necessarily getting satisfaction of attachment and connection. Where in my life do I get satisfaction of that?
Yeah.
Who offers unconditional love to us?
Hopefully we can start with ourselves, huh? I don't know, where do you start? Like for somebody who does feel like they have all this unconditional love, or someone who is in these like negative self-talk statements, or that they don't think they're enough, where do they start? I mean, other than, come to therapy, but also where can they start just on a day-to-day basis, or what do you recommend for somebody who does struggle with that? Whether it's, severe, or where they're like really gonna have a really hard time, or whether it's just early on, where do you start?
Yeah, I think that it comes down to changing a perspective, because most people are wanting to get fed from outside sources coming into them, but the true truth is I can create myself from the inside out, not waiting for the outside in to approve of me. That it is a radical change of thought to understand that my perception of myself really is generated inside of myself. It is not generated based on having enough money, enough likes, enough stuff, enough people, because a lot of people are lonely and they're never alone, and a lot of people are lonely and they're always alone because they're still waiting for these outside sources to fulfill them and to give them, to satisfy them. And that's where addictions really come from, and looking for self-soothing behaviors on the outside of self to be able to make up for the lack of feeling love on the inside of self. So people are distraction addicts, whether it's sex, drugs, alcohol, video games, whatever, shopping. They're distraction addicts to self-soothe the suffering of that lonely boy or lonely girl on the inside. They didn't feel loved when they were young. They didn't feel connected when they were young. They're always waiting for someone else to do it for them. So they become relationship addicts, sex addicts, whatever. They're doing some outside stimulant thing as a way to be able to keep themselves numb from their suffering. And it's a genuine suffering. Loneliness is a genuine suffering that most people in the world today experience, I believe, especially young people, teenagers, young adults, married couples. I think most people feel that. And the only way that we can get around from not feeling that is to learn how to look about it from the inside out. And that is, I choose to love me. I choose to love me. I want to feel good about me. And the way that I'm going to do that is by giving myself positive proclamations. I'm going to reprogram my brain and proclaim myself to be who I want to be, as opposed to waiting to be liked and loved by the outside sources. Because as long as we have this insane loop going on inside of our minds, that we have to be liked and loved by every new person we see, everybody at the grocery store, everybody that drive up, everybody, at church or at home or family, there's this constant demand of being liked and loved by everybody. It's rather insane because it never works. It never works because there's going to be someone who's going to pull in front of you on the freeway and flip you off, or there's going to be someone who's going to be reactive or not nice to you at work or at school or at church or something. There's going to be people that are not going to always like and love you. So instead of waiting for them to do it, we choose to do it inside of ourselves by changing our thinking, telling ourselves, I cannot be liked and loved by everyone all the time. I love myself. I cannot be everything for everyone all the time. I like myself. I am good enough for myself. I forgive myself. It's about changing this irrational thinking into rational. We change irrational into rational thinking as a means of learning how to accept ourselves and love ourselves for who we are and where we're at now, not waiting for the outside source. But that's tough. That's tough because we've been conditioned to believe we have to be liked and loved by everyone all the time in order to create an economy, essentially. I mean, the United States of America does not want you to have really positive self-esteem because if you do, you're probably not going to be as anxious. And if you're not as anxious, you're not going to be buying all the stuff that really creates the economy. It's really, watching any level of news organization, if it bleeds, it leads. If it's going to be a tragedy, more about, COVID or whatever the latest tragedy is, the Russian tragedy is going on right now. I don't know, all this stuff that's scary. The media promotes fear. Politics promote fear. A lot of other organizations promote fear. Religions a lot of times promote fear as a way to be able to keep people coming back for more, because we keep on having to look at the news to see what's going to happen next or what's going on with the latest politic thing, so we can make sure that we're going to be ready and be safe. But there's still this position of really anticipating worst case scenarios. Bad things are coming my way. Only bad people come my way. I'm always going to have bad outcomes because I'm looking at my life as the world is coming to an end. Like a lot of young people don't want to have kids right now because they don't believe that the world's really going to be worth living in. That the world is going to be not enough food or pollution or not enough energy, or it's too expensive, or housing complications. I mean, all this stuff, and people forecast the future anticipating these really bad things because they believe inside themselves those things create me to be happy. The future, what's going to happen in the future is going to create me to be happy because they're waiting for the future to be okay for them. As opposed to, I'm going to be okay inside of me and living today, learning how to live today as opposed to living in the future.
Yeah, that's something I think you've talked about before, as well as how people today often get caught up in either their pronouns or get caught up in, little small technicalities of things. No matter how big of a deal it is, people get so caught up in the little details of things that they're not actually living lives that are fulfilling, that have meaning, that have purpose to them. They're just so, just tied to labels and things like that, that it's not even, they're even putting a condition on themselves. They're making themselves a statistic rather than making themselves into a person that they want to be, and a person that they believe in, and a person that they want to see succeed, whether the future comes or not, whether the future is awful or the future's great. They just don't even see how they could be thriving in that because they're so caught in that
The
small
little
mindset.
details and being stuck in that one thing that has to be the way that I very much want it to be, and if it's not, then I'm going to be really upset.
Yeah.
As opposed to, you know what, I'm going to choose to be happy today. Today I am happy. I am looking for happy. I am looking for joy. I am looking for kind people to be with. And if people can't measure up to those things for me to get kindness back, maybe that's not the best place for me to go.
Sure.
Because I'm doing it from the inside out as opposed to the outside in. The outside in is what we've been conditioned to believe by living in America, living in modern society, whatever. The outside world matters most, as opposed to I matter most.
Right.
I matter most. And as we learn how to shift that thinking, which takes practice and it takes some therapy to figure that out, is we can find happiness because we choose to find happiness, because we choose to be happy, which is a different mindset. And learning how to look for equality in relationships, not a matter of demand of power and control and conditional love, conditional like. I like you if you're performing based on how I want you to perform. But when we look at it the other way, from the inside out, and we see that I'm good enough, there's not really a threat of having to be liked and loved by everyone all the time.
Sure.
We're okay inside of ourselves because we choose to be okay inside of ourselves. But that takes training. It takes training to know how to do it and how to be better at it. And the people that learn how to do it find something called peace of mind. Peace of mind.
Ah, yes.
Zen. because we're not living in a culture that wants people to have peace of mind. We live in a culture of high anxiety and fear.
And anticipation. To be doing more, being more,
having more, obtaining more, going more.
Yeah.
And the person who does and bees that word, has and does and bees, does all this stuff and has all this stuff are supposed to be happy.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like having a big house. I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah.
People always want to have a big house, and there's like 2 people living in it, or 4 people living in a big house. Why?
Yeah.
Because it's status, it's this thing to have, whatever, you have the money to pay for it. The problem is that people get lost in it. If you're living in a big house, you're probably taking up 2 or 3 rooms, and the rest of the place isn't really utilized.
Mm-hmm.
Because why? If you're going to have a connection with someone, you're going to be around them. Otherwise, you're going to be alone. And so people they're shy away from the alone time, the loneliness part of it, to find that connection and to come back to feeling whole. So having extra stuff or extra large things doesn't necessarily work. It works for the economy, it works for status, it works for superficial things that don't, for the outside sources to, oh wow, look at him, the wow factor, but as opposed to the sense of self that I'm okay inside of myself. I am okay. And it doesn't come down to obtaining more stuff to feel okay, because there's really no one to impress except for to find happiness within inside itself.
Yeah. I was just thinking of, I listened to this audiobook a little while ago. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving, NFUCK. And it is essentially this is that you need to find something that gives you a sense of self and stop caring about all this other stuff like the house and the car and what people think you should be doing and what your performance is and all these other things that make it feel like life and love is so conditional, and just saying like, okay, just subtly stop caring about the things that are going to make you feel like you're less and make you feel like your insides are less than anybody else who you're with during your day or anybody else who you run into or whatever it is. And he talks about again like that cycle of just how we sit there and we say like, oh, I'm not enough, and I hate myself because I'm not enough, and then I hate myself for thinking that I'm not enough, and then you just go down this big rabbit hole of all of that
over and over and over.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember who wrote that.
It's Mark Manson.
Mark Manson?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good one. Have you listened to it?
Yep, Mark Manson. I actually have that book. I read that book a long time ago.
Yeah.
When it first came out. And I agree with what he has to say in regard of just this. It's about stop caring about what everybody else thinks.
Right.
And learning how to live your life for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably have a little bit different take on some of it, but
sure.
My part about it is to be focusing on what you want. If you're really focusing on finding peace of mind, and you tell your mind every single day, I am peace, I am joy, I am fair, I am kind. Your brain will look for the people, situations, circumstances that are going to create that place inside of your mind. Because your mind does not want to be in chaos. Your mind actually wants to find safety and love.
Yeah.
And so we got to learn how to focus on what we want to find. But to focus on that, we need to know what it is. We need to know what we're looking for, as opposed to waiting for some arbitrary thing to show up for us in this outside source. Like some people are lucky. So people will come to me. I see these people, they're so lucky. They have like this thing. They have like a nice car or whatever they're looking for. And I don't have that in my life. How come I don't have that? And it really gets back to, well, what are you focusing on? You're focusing on what you don't have, as opposed to setting a goal, reverse engineering it back to what you really want to have, and then implementing that every single day. But that is, my belief is, if you're going to be looking for happiness, is to wake up in the morning and say, I am happy. I am happy. I have peace in my mind. I have joy in my heart. I have happiness in my life. And as you're really focusing on finding peace, joy, and happiness, it will find you. Whereas if you wake up in the morning, I am anxious, I'm afraid, I'm not loved, I'm not going to be finding a partner, I'll never get ahead, I'm never going to graduate school, I'm never going to have a house, I hate my wife, I hate myself, I hate, waiting, all these negative things that people say. Guess what? It keeps on showing up.
Right, you're just inviting it. You're
keeps
opening
on
the
showing
door.
up. Yep.
Yeah.
But it's hard to shift from that negative mindset into a more positive mindset. And that's where really therapy does a good job with giving assignments and giving other ideas on how to be able to create that outcome. But it is hard to shift. It's hard to shift the mindset, especially when all the outside sources keep on saying, you're not good enough for that. Your brother's smarter than you are. You're not going to make it to heaven because X, Y, Z. You're not going to be this or that. You're not going to be enough. You're too old. You're too young. All of these things that are on the outside of us that keep on telling us that we're not good enough. Right. We're not enough.
So what do you think, like, if you could come up with a top 3 suggestions or a top 2 suggestions for somebody who finds themselves in that I'm not enough, in that place where they feel so confined by outside expectations, what would be like your top 2 suggestions for someone who's dealing with that?
I think the first one would be to write down that thought, I'm not enough, or I'm not handsome enough, and I'm not pretty enough. To write down that negative thought on a piece of paper, not on your phone preferably, because there's some actually therapeutic process by writing more than texting, because we have to actually put some thought into what we're doing by writing, instead of just kind of happenstance by typing. Anyway, so writing down that negative thought and then reversing it. What can I say to myself that is going to be loving myself? What can I say to myself that is going to be kind to myself? What can I say to myself that's going to be good? Or if you go to my book at Navigating Your Mind, Achieving a Life of Peace, Joy, and Happiness. It's my book. We'll come back and talk about that more. But in the back of that book, in chapters 8 and 9, I talk about positive proclamations. So people are proclaiming themselves, or driving a flag in the ground and raising a new flag. This is my new self, who I am going to be in the future. This is not about the past and what other people want from me or think I should do. This is who I am, what I want. And that means I'm going to be this. I'm going to be a new me. So we write down the negative thing, and then we replace it with a positive thing. And then we write that out over and over and over, and we practice. First thing in the morning, midday, before we go to bed. I am loved for who I am and where I am at. Every day, over and over. And I would do it for probably at least 50 times out loud. So get your car, in the shower. I love myself for who I am, where I'm at. I am okay. I cannot be liked and loved by everyone all the time. I am okay. So you pick one of these things and then say it over and over and over. And I use something that's called a jam looper. You can get on your phone. Just go to your app store and get on your phone, and it's a free app, and you talk into it, and then it loops around. It's used for rappers or whatever, but it just loops around, and you say it out loud, and you listen to it, and if you read it at the same time, so you say it, you read it, you listen to it, over and over and over, 15 minutes a day. Within 2 or 3 days, you will start to feel better. You will start to believe it, based on brain neuroplasticity. So our neurons are used to firing in the same direction all the time, because that's what we were conditioned to believe as children. And we can choose to break out of that. At first, we feel like we're lying to ourselves, because the whole world has told us, oh, you're inadequate, you'll never be good enough. But I choose to do different. I choose internally, I am going to be a different person. I choose that I love myself for who I am, where I'm at, and my capacity to grow. That's one of my positive proclamations. I proclaim I love myself for who I am and where I am at, and my capacity to grow and change. And I say that over and over and over and over all day. And guess what? The new neural connections take place inside of your brain. What wires together, fires together. So what we really think about all the time is what our brains become. And so that changes how we feel. And sometime we'll talk about how that process works. But when we get that new feeling inside, it motivates us to do it over and over and over. But at first, it's really hard, because it goes against the way that our brains have been oriented as far as feeling inadequate and waiting for the outside sources to believe that we are good enough. But that's the reason why it's insane, is because we're expecting something to change that doesn't change. We have to change it inside of ourselves. We change it by proclaiming it for ourselves, and we become our proclamation. And it's a beautiful thing. Do you know why? When someone comes back around and they say, I don't like you, it's like you don't even feel it.
You say, cool, good for you.
Because there's the automatic positive thought, I cannot be liked and loved by everyone all the time. I cannot be liked and loved by everyone all the time. It's just this automatic thought, because that's what I've trained my brain to believe when I'm out in public or whatever. It's a matter of, well, you're old, or you're bald, or you're this. I used to have kids tell me, you're an old bald guy, and they swear at me. And I'd laugh at them. Teenagers, they would do anything to create distance or something.
Right.
And so, but I would laugh at them, and they're like, why are you laughing? It's like, that's just funny. You're trying to push me away, but I'm not going anywhere.
Right.
But it wasn't injurious to me. But the reason why is because there was lots of training inside of my mind to recognize that I can't be liked and loved by everyone all the time.
Yeah. And that's definitely a good thing, because kind of back to what we were saying earlier, is getting caught up in the labels, or getting caught up in things that people say about you or think about you or whatever it is, But if you've trained yourself to think exactly how you want to be seen is what you are creating yourself to be, and if you're not that for somebody, then you're still happy with who you are as a person.
Yeah.
I think that's a good, healthy place to be, and does help you have a lot of peace of mind, that you're just okay with who you are, and that you're comfortable with that in a lot of ways.
But that sometimes it takes mental health training to be able to learn how to do that, because again, in the beginning, we're talking about people who are demanding to be liked and loved by everyone all the time, and when they're not, they're really anxious, and that creates anger, and that creates depression. So a lot of times when people have these outside things that happen, is that they're really sad about it, and they just don't feel like they have enough energy or time, and they don't know what to do, and they're confused. And that's the really time to really reach out and get into therapy and ask for help, because we have good people who can help you. We have people in our practice that really care for people, and they'll be coming on board on this podcast. We have Sarah Stengel, who's a licensed professional counselor. She's out of Pocatello. We have Emily Cohen, who is LMSW, and she's from all over the place, but right now she's in Ogden, Utah. And then we have Maria Roz, who is in Boise, and all three of them do online therapy. And then I do therapy in office in Idaho Falls and also online. But we are a team of people who really care about people, and we really want to see people get to a better place in their lives, to be able to have more connection inside of their family, to have more love for themselves, and to learning how to navigate their mind in order to achieve a life of peace, joy, and happiness. So we're very lucky to have the team we have.
Yeah, everybody is super great to work with, and I think everybody just genuinely cares about helping people where they're at and helping them achieve that life that they want to have, but specifically feeling peaceful and joyful and happyful.
Happyful. So
yes.
Where can we be contacted?
We can be contacted by phone or email or online. Our website is eastidahotherapy.com. Our phone number is 208-403-0135, and we can be contacted by email at klwaidaho@gmail.com. And you'll chat with me, and I can get you set up with any of our therapists within the week.
That's right.